What is up, everybody? As you guys know, until like November, I'm going to do a lot of these late 2018 reviews just because a lot of things change. But with this phone specifically, there's really not too much that has changed, but we did get a new Android version and this phone is just a little bit older now. So let's just see how it holds up in the later part of 2018. Now, this phone actually came out in 2015 in March, the Samsung Galaxy S6. I can't believe I didn't even mention the name of it yet. So it's a little bit over 3 years old at the time. And honestly, looking around the body, it doesn't look that bad. Even now, it looks pretty decent. The only problem is that there's quite a bit of bezel around it, and we've kind of gone to the bezel-less trend. So this phone, if you get it now, is going to look a little bit dated, I'm not going to lie. It doesn't really hold up in terms of just the way it looks, but the way it feels, in my opinion, is another thing. I think it feels pretty premium because not only do you get glass on the front, obviously most phones get glass on the front, but you also get glass on the back, and it feels like a pretty premium device. The buttons seem not that horrible. It does have a fingerprint sensor, so you kind of have that going for it. So it doesn't really feel that horrible in my opinion. Now looking at the front, you do have a 5.1-inch Super AMOLED display. It's 1440p, and I will say that this panel is definitely a pro for this phone. If you're going to get this phone, you're not going to have any problems looking at the screen at all. It has a pretty high PPI in my opinion, pixels per inch. Basically, you're not going to be able to see that many pixels. Obviously, if you get this phone, you're not going to be able to see it unless you get like a magnifying glass, but it's pretty good, I would say, overall. Now, one of the downsides of this phone is that it doesn't have any like IP67, IP66, IP whatever, dust and water resistance. So if you get some water on this phone, chances are you might end up breaking it. But again, that's kind of a what if situation. I've had phones that have like absolutely no IP certifications, but I don't get any water on it. And sometimes if you do get water on it, you're still good. But in a case like this, it doesn't have anything like that. So you're not guaranteed or warranted or anything like that. So in terms of just the way it looks, in terms of everything, I will say the body is pretty good. Again, it doesn't look the best because of the bezels around it, but I don't think it feels that bad in your hand. In terms of software, however, this is probably one of the biggest downsides of getting an Android phone, unless you get like a Pixel or Nexus, well, Nexus not anymore, but a Pixel or something, is because you don't get upgrades for that longer updates. So this phone started off getting Android 5.0.2. It pretty much ended at Android Nougat. Now you are able to go and custom ROM your phone and everything like that. There is a root out for the Samsung Galaxy S6, and like I said, you're able to root it, ROM it. I don't know how many ROMs are out for this thing. I'll probably say there's an Android 8.0 ROM out for it. There might be an Android 9 ROM out for it eventually, not right now probably, but later on this year, up until next year. So if you're into that kind of stuff, then I'll say 100% this is not a bad option of rooting or ROMing it. Now you kind of have to see, is the phone stable? Is the ROM stable? Are there anything wrong with it? Because most of the time, if you're getting a newer version, I mean, this phone stopped getting updates a little while ago, but I will say that whatever you do, if you plan on custom ROMing it or whatever, that's probably what I would do if I were to get this phone. But again, every single person's is different. But again, like, you're still going to get updated through the app. So if you have like Temple Run downloader and there's an update for it, you're still going to be able to use it, play it, update it, whatever. So if you want the newest features, then that's one thing. But if you keep it stock on TouchWiz, you're going to be kind of limited. But again, TouchWiz has a lot of, features and stuff in it that stock Android does not have. It is a little bit bloated. I never really liked TouchWiz, but you do have that kind of edge when you compare it to stock Android, that you have some features on TouchWiz that you won't necessarily get on stock Android. But again, you're comparing like a 2-year-old software to like a new software, and Android 9.0 is pretty decent. In terms of the specs and the performance side, it has a Exynos 7420 octa chipset, a octa-core CPU clocked at 2.1 GHz, and 3 GB of RAM. And in my opinion, I think the performance is pretty decent. It's actually on the better side. There's really nothing really horrible. My usage and my performance and everything, the bar of it is set pretty low. I don't expect the world and the moon and everything like that, but I do expect the phone to be pretty decent at performance, and this phone definitely checks off that mark. The 3 GB of RAM really help it out. I'm actually surprised that it got 3 GB of RAM, because that's kind of a large amount for a phone that came out in 2015. I mean, if you think about it, I know I'm not supposed to compare iOS and Android, but the iPhone 10 has 3 GB of RAM, and the iPhone 10R that's coming out in like a couple weeks, that also has 3 GB of RAM, but it's not really supposed to be compared side by side. iOS is completely different from Android, but kind of puts things in perspective a little bit. So in terms of performance, if you're gaming or whatever, you'll be okay. Now, some games I do find weird on Android, because the games that are coming out, like Real Racing 3 and all these different games, they're kind of suited to be more used on higher intensive phones like the Razer phone or a Note 9 or Note 8. And those phones all have like 4, 5, 6 GB of RAM, even more than that probably. So when you're getting a phone like a Galaxy S6, you're using the same apps and everything that a lot of other more suitable phones are using. So you might find yourself, the phone might be powerful. I think the Galaxy S6 is decently powerful still, but you're still going to get some skip frames here, some games that might be slow here and there, just because those games are supposed to be more suited towards the newer phones. And it's a little bit different than iPhone and iOS in general, just because there's not that many iPhones out, but there's so many Android phones out. So they have to make these games suited for all those Android phones. So it is what it is. I think you're going to have pretty decent performance on it. Don't expect too much, but if you're very basic at your tasks, I think you'll be fine. I would rate the performance probably like a 6.5 out of 10, maybe like a 6.8 out of 10, just because you kind of have to factor in the software in it too. It's running a little bit of older software, but it is what it is, and I don't think it's horrible. Now, in terms of the camera, I think it's actually a pro for this phone too. Now, it is 16 megapixels. It's a single sensor. This actually came out before like the 2-camera phase and all that stuff. Actually, I think it came out right before the 7 Plus, but this phone does have OIS and it has autofocus and all that good stuff. You are able to shoot 4K on it at 30 frames per second, and you can shoot 1080p at 60 frames per second. I really wish they allowed us to shoot 1080p at 120 frames per second, because some of the competition, like the iPhone 6s at the time, was able to do that, and it's just a little weird, but I totally understand it. If it is what it is, like I said, you can't really change it at this point. But the camera is very good, I think. Even now, I mean, Samsung has a tendency of making really good sensors, and this is no exception. I really found that the Galaxy S6 was pretty good. It's definitely on the better side, and it's definitely a pro. It does have a 5 megapixel front-facing camera. You can shoot 1440p videos on it, which was kind of surprising. I was not expecting that. But the front camera on this isn't as good as the back camera, and I found that to be pretty much the case on like every single Android that I tested that came out before like 2016. So it'll get the job done. If you're in good lighting, it'll work, but if you're in bad lighting, I mean, good luck not getting all that grain and all that noise in the photo. But I would definitely say the camera overall is definitely a pro for this phone. Just the front camera just isn't as good as you might think it is. Now, this is probably the worst aspect of this phone, and not the camera, but moving on to actually the battery life. And now when they released the Galaxy S6, they did something completely weird. I don't know why they ever did this, but not only did they make the battery smaller, but they also sealed the battery in, and they also removed the removable storage. So you couldn't put in any more storage on top of what you had. So if you bought the phone in a 32 gigabyte variant, you cannot put any more storage in. Now, they eventually added it back in with the Galaxy S7, but that still doesn't excuse them from the fact of what were they thinking when they released the Galaxy S6 and they did that. It's really one of the biggest fails I've ever seen. Obviously, this phone still worked and everything, but I would have never gotten this phone, honestly, if it was for that. And battery life wasn't even improved at all. It actually went down. Battery life is definitely not that good on this device, in my opinion, and especially when you consider the fact that this phone came out 3 years ago. The battery size overall and the deterioration and the depreciation of battery has probably gone down. So it's not a 2,550 milliamp hour battery anymore. If you get this phone used, it's probably like a 2,000 milliamp hour battery now. It probably depreciated, 10, 20, 15, 20, I don't know, percent. It's definitely not at its full potential anymore, which is okay. It happens, every phone does this. It's not just exclusive to Samsung, but when you get a phone used, you kind of have to keep that in mind. That's one of the things I have to reiterate to people, because they think, oh, it's still going to be at full potential. No, if you're getting a phone used, even if it's in great condition, the battery is one of those things that's going to depreciate a lot faster than maybe like a camera would depreciate, like it breaking, or a home button might. So that's kind of one thing to keep in mind. So I'd probably rate the battery probably like a 5 out of 10, maybe like a 4.5, just because this phone is pretty performance heavy. It has 3 gigs of RAM, pretty heavy spec phone, but they put a weird battery in it, and they also removed the removable battery. So now, some other important things to note, like I said, it does have a fingerprint sensor. You are able to unlock it by holding it down, but I still probably would like Touch ID over this fingerprint sensor, but it is a fingerprint sensor and it works. So now, another thing about this phone is that it does occasionally heat up if you're doing a lot of tasks, if you're doing a lot of things, and that's pretty common with Samsung phones. The Galaxy S6 also heated up a little bit more. I think the Galaxy S4 was probably the worst at it, but the Galaxy S6 does heat up a little bit, so keep that in mind. A little bit more than normal, so you might be holding it and be like, man, this one's kind of getting hot. You also have Qi wireless charging, depending on the market. Some phones do have it, some phones don't, so you can just, I guess, check if you just put on a wireless charger. Now, this phone did come out in 3 different sizes, 32, 64, and 128 gigabyte options. So remember, if you're getting this phone used, I would definitely recommend getting it at least in a 64 gig option. I would stay away from a 32. And it still has the headphone jack, which I kind of have to say every time, but which honestly every Samsung phone has the headphone jacks. But to answer the burning question, is the Samsung Galaxy S6 worth it in the later part of 2018? Honestly, my opinion is my opinion. I don't think this phone is worth it in 2018, the later part, and going forward. Now, some things could change. I could find a really good Android 9.0 ROM out for it and flash it and see it's good, but as of right now, I don't think it's worth it, because there's a lot better options out there for the money you would spend on this phone. So if you get this phone now, you probably spend anywhere from like $100 to $150 for a 64GB variant. Like I said, I would stay away from 32. But with that money, you can, if you did a little bit of research and digging, you could probably find a Google Pixel for that much money. You could probably find a Galaxy Note 5 for that money if you're lucky, and I would recommend a Galaxy Note 5 over the Galaxy S6, even though that one didn't have the best battery life. And if you do a little bit more digging, you could probably find like a Galaxy S7 for that price too, and I would really recommend a Galaxy S7 over a Galaxy S6 just because you do gain the removable battery, the removable storage, and you also gain a little bit of a bigger battery as well. So those are the options that I'm presenting. Again, if the Galaxy S6 is your only option, then yeah, go for it. It's not a horrible phone, just keep a charger with you, but I think for the money you would spend on this, I think there's a little bit of better options out there. Now that's if you're going the used route, but if you want to go the certified refurbished route, again, the Galaxy S6 is still a little bit priced heavy. I'll go ahead and link a Galaxy S6 down in the description below if you want to go to it, but I'll also link a Galaxy S7, a Google Pixel, and a Note 5 down in the description too if you want to pick up any of those. I'll let you guys compare the prices and everything, but as of right now, that's kind of my viewpoint on it. It's not a horrible phone, it had a place in time, but I just don't think it's necessarily worth the money you would spend on this, where you could spend that money on another phone that could technically give you a better experience. And that is pretty much how I'm going to end it. If you have any questions or anything like that, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, leave it down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your opinion on it. Hit that like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the links in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, Lo-Fi Alpaca. That is also linked down in the description. I do a lot more iOS reviews and iOS comparisons and all those things, so definitely check that out. It really mean a lot. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys, and hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.